Welcome to the ACS podcast family.
We're your hosts, Angie and Charlene,
where every week you can find new material centered around your life.
Thanks for joining us on our journey. Welcome back to week 4 on self-care. We have a special treat for you guys this week. We're going to talk about 2 different types of self-care, social and mental. So let's start with social. What is social self-care?
Well, social self-care is all about the relationships in our lives and how we deepen them, develop them, and how we nurture them. And what happens is when we get busy, when we get stressed out, we tend to neglect this side of our lives. We tend to neglect the people that matter in our lives. We tend to withdraw and we get really busy doing things. And we forget that we are human beings and we get busy in all the doingness of trying to get everything done and let this area of our life just kind of slide off the radar. Kind of backing up for 1 second, we've been talking about self-care for a few weeks now. And I know that we've hit on it a little bit before, but really, why are we talking about self-care? Why is self-care even important? And one of the big things is because taking care of ourselves helps us be a better member of society. We can be more productive. We can relate better to others, which is totally going to go into our whole conversation this week on social self-care. And when our own cup is full, when we spend the time filling up our own cup, we are better able to pour into other people's cups. So we become better givers. We become more productive. We become able to help people better, which is ultimately what a lot of us want to do.
I know that we're not talking just to women, but just this week I had a group of women that I was with, and there was 6 of us. And of those 6 of us, 1 took a shower that morning. And how it came up was because the subject of dry shampoo. And no, we're not dirty women. That's not it. But just the idea of having to get up, get the kids ready, move on with whatever was going on to get to this meeting. The easiest thing to do was to not take care of themselves that morning, to get everybody else ready. And just throw some dry shampoo in your hair, put some deodorant on, and go to the meeting.
That is all too common. We neglect ourselves. We neglect taking care of ourselves. And that adds to our stress, right?
It does. But you know who shined at the meeting? The one who showered. She was so empowered. She was just glowing that whole entire time.
You just feel better when you're able to take care of yourself. And then you're able to put more effort into what you're doing. And it also reduces stress. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I get to that point or, I have that, it's like, okay, do I stink? Do I smell bad? How's my hair? Do I need to pull it up? Is it really getting oily? Even if I put off showering for half a day, I can start to get to that. Or if I don't get time to shower after I go to the gym and it's dry shampoo and some deodorant and some body spray. But you still worry about that. And then that takes up mental energy. It takes up and fills space in your mind so that you're not really able to focus on and be present with with the reason that you neglected the self-care anyway.
Right. And we didn't even, to talk about her being all sparkly, it was because we were talking about this that it was in my head when we were talking about it. But it's not like we talked about who showered when we walked in the door. I mean, that came at the end of the meeting, when we were done and somebody asked for a dry shampoo recommendation. But it was, when you look back at it, there's usually a person in your life that is got their poop in a group. They know what's going on and they probably don't, but they make it look like they do because they feel so confident and they have so much to give the world because they took the time to shower. And not necessarily shower, but to take care of themselves with this self-care.
That's a great analogy, though, just saying with time to shower, because we get stuck in our day-to-day lives, and so often we don't ever make it out of that fight or flight response, right? We have so much going on that it's just fight or flight. We just need to get through it. We need to power through it. We just need to buckle down and do it. And we get so caught up in those mundane details and we get stuck. We get stuck in these pathways where we don't see that we have options. And let me tell you, there are always options. Everything that we do all day long is a decision. And you are one decision away from a completely different life. That decision can be to stop and indulge in some self-care. I say indulge, but it really isn't an indulgence. It is a necessary part of life.
But it feels like it if you're neglecting it. It feels like something special, and it feels like a treat when you first start out because it's something you don't do.
It is a treat. It is a necessary part of life, but it is always a treat, and it always feels so good to do that. So let's talk about a few tips, and then we'll dive into what social self-care is. And this is one that is really neglected by a lot of people, is the social side of things. Before we even get started, we'll talk about a few tips and tricks, and maybe we'll come back to those a little bit at the end.
Sounds good.
So the first one is go slow. If you're feeling overwhelmed, again, we've shared a lot of different self-care activities with you, and we don't mean for these to consume your entire day. Again, some of them can be done in as little as 5 minutes. Some of them can be done in as little as 1 or 2 minutes. Don't let it overwhelm you, but if you are feeling overwhelmed, just back up and start small. Pick one area to focus on, pick one thing to focus on. Work on mastering that before you try to layer on anything else. And it's okay. Life is all about those 1% improvements. And those 1% improvements over time are going to add up to some major changes.
For sure. So the next thing to do is not just to focus small, but actually schedule time. So I know that I just bought a planner thanks to your recommendation. And I have literally scheduled things into my day that I need to do for the day. So if I have to schedule that I need to make a hair appointment, I'm going to schedule it, make a hair appointment, because I'm the worst person to, I don't, and then I can't get in. Well, I should have scheduled 3 weeks ago. I should have scheduled 6 weeks ago, but I don't take the time to schedule self-care. I just think, oh, I've got time right now. I can go do this right now. And then I can't, so then I'm not doing it, and I'm neglecting myself because I didn't schedule the time to do it.
So I have a friend who actually puts meditation time in her planner. She has a planner, and for her, cooking is self-care. She loves to cook. It really fills her up. And so she will schedule out days and times when she is just going to cook. And sometimes it's for herself, sometimes it's for a whole family, sometimes it's for other people, sometimes she, feeds whoever's around. But she schedules time to do that because that's what fills her up. And if she doesn't schedule it, she might get busy or she might get overrun with other things. So scheduling can be super beneficial, and it allows you to know exactly what you're going to do and when. Last week or the week before, when I was talking about Damon and I and how on Tuesday nights we pick out what we're going to have for dinner on Friday. Because on Fridays we cook together. It's part of our routine. It's part of our habit. And for me, that's not self-care, but it's the same concept. Like hanging out with him is probably the social self-care. The cooking itself and the meal planning and the meal prep isn't for me. But creating that habit and knowing that's what I'm going to do, that's when I'm going to do it, and that's how it's going to transpire really gives me the freedom to put it aside and not think about it until it's time to do that, because I know that I have a plan and I know that it's in my schedule and it's already created.
And stick to your plan. I think it was last week when we were talking and I got a message that somebody wanted to schedule a conference call, and it was on a day that I scheduled off to be with my family. And I remember looking at you like, I don't want to take this conference call. And you're like, so why are you doing it? Like, it's already been booked off of my schedule. That was time that I scheduled for self-care, which was a social self-care for my family, that we needed to be together and have this time. And then it was so just this fire living inside of me of like, turn that off. You can just take a couple hours and take this call and do this. And it was you, thank you, was like, you have permission to tell her no. And it ended up working out fine. We were able to do it the following Monday. It was a better time for her, actually, but she was offering the first available time. So it's okay to stick to your schedule. If you're scheduling cooking, stick to that schedule. Cook. Don't take a networking, appointment. Well, networking appointments can be social too, but don't take away your time that you've scheduled. Stick to your schedule.
That's just it, because if you stick to your schedule, you're going to find that you are freer. And that can help you give yourself permission to say no. Because had we not talked about that for you, Charlene, last week, and you already having that scheduled off, we wouldn't even have had that conversation. And you wouldn't have given yourself permission to be okay to say, hey, that really doesn't work for me. Let's do something else. What you're doing, if you had said yes, yeah, you probably could have made the time, right? We make the time for what's important. Making the time for that call would have said, I'm not important, but this other person is more important than I am when that's self-care time and that's family time. I'm really excited for you that worked out and that you had decided to do that, because that is, in essence, saying yes to yourself, which you are the most important person to say yes to, because when you are full, you can give to others.
Right. So if you need permission, we're giving you permission right now. You have permission to say no and stick to your schedule.
And make it practical. It doesn't always have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be a full day. It might be 1 hour to go have lunch with a friend. Right. It might be 15 minutes to sit in your car at a park and meditate. It might be whatever it is. So make it practical. But there are definitely time slots, things that will fit into the schedule that you already have without actually taking anything away. And even without adding extra burden to your day, you will find that this will be better, especially when you're starting. What you want to do is make it easy and make it fun.
Yes. Speaking of easier things and being consistent and creating those habits, it's easy. When people are getting up and going to the gym in the morning, okay, people say it's easy to do. I have not been able to create that habit yet, but I wasn't consistent enough with it. I was like 4 weeks in and I was like, I can't do it. But I know that if I would have, then I could end up being in that habit. And it would just be, this is what I do, because I have friends that are exactly like me, where they don't want to get up in the morning. And for 2 years now, they get up and they go to this boot camp thing and they get done and they go to hot yoga and they go get these shakes and these teas in the morning. And then they start their day and my alarm clock has not even gone off. Not yet. They're done with 2 different workout things and they're not done. But they created a habit. They held each other accountable.
Sometimes it can be uncomfortable and sometimes it takes a while. And going back to, you want to make it fun, you want to make it easy, you want to make it rewarding. And we can really dig into some of the science behind that and talk about how we can create those sustainable habits, because it's probably pretty silly to think that you can snap your fingers and make some major life changes all at once without developing some new habits. In order to create different results, you have to do different things, and it can be really challenging to do. I heard somebody once say that they are amazing sprinters. They can do anything for a day. It's that long distance marathon running that becomes a problem, right? I can't do that long distance. And you just hit the nail on the head. I did it for a few weeks, and then it was so trying on me that I just gave up, because you were trying to make a large change all at once.
Right. Oh, okay, you said sprinters. I tell you, my brother-in-law runs. And when I say he runs, like he runs 100-mile races. I didn't even know there was races for 100-mile runners. Like, that's like halfway across the state.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
But he's amazing at it. But it didn't just happen overnight. He didn't just wake up and go, today I'm going to run 100 miles. It was something that he had a desire to do, and he worked up and he took and scheduled that time for himself and scheduled it. And now he can do these amazing things because of taking that tiny baby step and scheduling that self-care time for him. Now he's accomplished goals.
Right. So it's all about those 1% shifts. Mm-hmm. Again, going back to the different types of self-care that we've been talking about, pick one, start somewhere. If you're able, or if you're already a pro at one, maybe layer another one on top. And so we'll talk to you a little bit about what social self-care is, maybe what mental self-care is, and kind of why it's important. I know we touched on that a little bit, but social self-care really is, again, going back to the basics, about the relationships in our lives. And how often is that the first thing that goes out the door? You get busy and you don't have time for your friends. You don't have time to pick up the phone and call them. You don't have time to go have lunch. You don't see them as much. And pretty soon they've faded into the background. And if you're like a lot of people, those relationships just kind of diminish. And suddenly you wake up one day and you're like, wow, I don't have any friends.
Right. I think the older we get, we all say that. We're like, do we even have friends? And it's not that we don't. It's just the difference between, what did we talk about? Casual friends and close friends. And what is it? Casual friends is, what, 50 hours? Like, explain that a little bit more. You're better at that than I am.
There was a study done by Dr. Jeffrey Hall out of the University of Kansas that talked about what it entails to make friends. And as adults, it takes about 50 hours for somebody to be considered a casual friend. This is somebody that you might call up, you might go hang out with, you're going to do something with. And that 50 hours, it needs to be quality time, not idle chit chat, but actually having some meaningful conversations, doing some meaningful things together. And it needs to be, for the most part, my understanding of the study was that it needs to be outside of work.
Right.
You think about that, you make a lot of friends while you're at work.
Mm-hmm.
But once you leave that job or change positions, what happens to those friendships? They kind of go by the wayside. They're work friends, but they're not really friends that you're going to count on a lot of time. Sometimes they are, that's fine, but in a lot of cases, I mean, I can think of job after job where I have moved on, moved to a different company or whatever, and those friends don't come with me, even though I was sharing a lot of really intimate parts of my life or a lot of details of my life with them at that point while we were working together.
It's almost like a compartmentalized friend. Like, okay, you are here.
Right.
But you stay here.
Making sure that you're taking those conversations and those social outings outside of the work environment is really important in developing those friendships. What Dr. Jeffrey Hall also found was that it takes about 200 hours of quality time in order to consider somebody a close friend. Mm-hmm. Think about that. That is a lot of time. If you are working, you're working 40 hours a week, and there are 4 weeks in a month, you're talking 160 hours in 1 month that you're spending at work. That is the amount of time. That's the amount of time plus one more week that you would need to spend with somebody. Having that quality time before you would consider them a close friend.
I love that you did that math in your head. Like, you were talking and I was pulling up my phone to get the calculator out, and I'm like, oh, she already did it. But that is a lot of time. And if you think about it, that's not just your idle chit chat while you're at work either. That's like, you're supposed to have that quality time with that person for that amount of time. That can take years in a regular, just normal friendship, going out to dinner. Because you go out to dinner and you're out what? 2 hours? Maybe 3 if you're like really chit chatty like at me.
Right.
And that's not an 8-hour day.
When you put that into perspective, putting that into perspective with our families, we get bogged down, not bogged down, but we invest in our families. That's who we spend our time with. And it can be really hard to get away and invest in those other social relationships. And to build those social relationships up, it's really important to not let the ones that you have go, because those are so important to the foundation of who we are. We are social beings. We are designed by nature to be social and to live in groups and to be harmonious and to have those connections and those interactions. So think about who you have in your life that you would consider that close friend. Who do you depend on? And how can you nurture and foster those relationships? Because that's really what social self-care is about.
Right. And if you need to, if you're like me, I guess, and you need to double it up, think about doing things that you can. You know, I just talked about my brother-in-law and his running. So he joined a running club. So he found somebody that has interests that were the same as him. And then they did it socially. They meet up socially and they go on these runs and they have these snacks and they sit and they talk, but they're together doing something social that also is benefiting them physically. So they're kind of hitting that double edge of self-care in one swoop. But you can think about doing things like that to look for things that you like to do, and then look for ways to do them.
That can be a lot of different things. Talking about the social clubs, talking about going out and calling your friends and making a lunch date. And maybe it's a group thing where a bunch of you get together. Or I know at my house, we like to have game night where we'll do maybe potluck style. Maybe I'll cook, maybe somebody else will cook, whatever, but we'll do dinner first. And then we'll sit around all night and play board games or card games or something like that. That's a great way to do it too. And that actually kind of goes into the mental self-care as well. That for me is really hits on a lot of different types of self-care, because the gaming or the board games, I don't do video games, but we do board games. And we do a lot of different varieties of those, and that stimulates the mind and really kind of plays into that mental self-care where I get to use my brain and I get to think about things, but I get to think about things I want to think about versus thinking about things that might have to do with work, or thinking about things that might have to do with, oh, did I make a good decision here, or did I make a good decision there? It kind of gives me a chance to step back and engage my brain in something that is stimulating for me that I like.
Even talking about video games, I mean, love, hate. But my children have developed, especially my oldest, I mean, she's going to be 20 soon, but she has developed relationships with people that she met video gaming, because that video gaming then has now become a social environment. You go online and you meet people, and if you are under the age of 18, please be careful with your internet usage. Talk to your parents about it. Done disclaimer. But she has made this group of friends they've maintained their friendship now for a good 5 years, if not longer, and they meet up. They literally got on an airplane and flew to a graduation for her. Then they got in a car and they drove to another graduation, and they're supportive, and they're from California and from Michigan and, South Dakota where we are, like Illinois. It is all social, and it started by video games. So you can even find a way to do it if you are an extreme introvert and you can't go out and talk to a stranger and say, hi, I'm Charlene. Like, let's be friends. But you can find ways to do it where you can be social in an environment that makes you comfortable too. So we're not, say, walk down the street and hold up a sign that says, I need a friend.
Right. Although you could do that if you wanted to.
Maybe we should do that one week.
Social experiment, and we'll let you guys know how it goes. But I actually kind of did that when I put my profile out there on Couchsurfing and said, come stay with me, right? And put up the sign going, hey, I need friends. That's not really what the sign said, but that's what I felt like I was doing at the time, and stepped outside of my comfort zone. And really that was my first foot in the door, and a step to how do I build those social relationships that I'm craving, because that was a huge part of what was missing in my life. And when I talk to a lot of people and when I work with a lot of my clients, that's something that's missing in their lives too. They're lonely and they're missing the social aspect of life, and they're missing out on that social self-care, and they're not taking care of that. And once you get so far removed from that and your comfort zone around your social setting gets so small, it can be really daunting and really overwhelming to look at how to take those first steps in order to start to create those relationships that you've been craving. So if you have them, it's really important to hold on to them and to nurture them and to reach out and do that. But if you don't have them, it can be a little daunting and overwhelming, but definitely take those steps. And we talked about a lot of really great ways to do that with
I just thought of another way. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But, so we have some restaurants here in town that when you go there, they give you a little postcard, and you can write on it, wish you were here eating tacos with me, and they send a postcard for you. So I have sent those to friends just because, I don't know, I didn't know who to write the postcard to, and they popped into my head right away. And then they called. And they were like, thanks for sending me a postcard. And it was, ridiculous. Come eat tacos with me. But it sparked a conversation. So doing something so teeny tiny that took me 45 seconds, maybe a minute of my time to do, then in turn created the telephone call, which has just, spiraled that relationship again.
I have never sent a postcard from one of those places. I've seen them. Totally need to do that.
Yes.
I have a meeting coming up here, and I'm thinking maybe I should change it and go to one of those.
Right.
Writing, being creative can take care of that mental self-care. So I know, simple, one line on a postcard, you might not think about that, but a lot of times we might go through our whole day without putting pen to paper. We might go through a whole week or a whole month without putting pen to paper. And something like that, you're getting an opportunity to be creative and express yourself with words too, which is a great form of mental self-care.
And draw those googly eyes with the big circles in the nose. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So taking that time to make that mental self-care, I mean, that's huge too. You just talked about writing, but also doing things that, for me, it's really hard to do. It's hard for me to stop and do something that has and it's not that it doesn't have a value, but in my head, it's not going to bring me money. It's not going to clean my house. It's not going to educate my kids. It's not going to further my career. So then why am I doing it? But writing, playing a game, doing a puzzle, those are fun things that I think, like, as adults, we get like, oh no, we don't have time to play anymore.
Playing is so important. It's so important. And sometimes you really like an activity and you forget how much you like it.
So there's lots of different great ways that you can change and have some mental self-care that, maybe you're not thinking about doing just because it's things that you used to do, when you had more time.
That's a great point. And with mental self-care, there are always things that you can do by yourself. If you are an introvert, maybe it's solving a puzzle. Sudoku puzzles. I love those. I go in spurts, especially when I travel. I will do a lot of those on the airplanes, bring a book. And so solving that puzzle and taking that time out for that, that's a great mental self-care activity as well.
I like Sudoku easy puzzles.
I like the hard ones if I have a pencil.
Oh, okay, good. Maybe that's what I need to be doing. I'm like, oh, scratch that out.
I have a little, I put little dots in the corners of where it is so that I can go through and eliminate and see it. I know there's people out there that are masters that don't have to do that, but once you get to the hard and the expert ones, I totally have to cheat.
I still have to cheat at the easy ones, so...
I know that there is one more week left. Mm-hmm. However, we're going to wrap up self-care this week, and we're going to bring you a treat and do something totally random and off the wall next week. So as we wrap up our final week on self-care, remember that there are several different types of self-care. And if you're curious about recommendations for any of the different types, go back and listen to our previous weeks. We have talked about physical self-care, we've talked about emotional self-care, we've talked about mental self-care and social self-care, and we also talked about spiritual self-care. That's what we started with. Thank you for filling that in. I got really brain dead there for a second.
No, you're good. And in the description, we have the links to the previous ones, so it's going to make it easy for you if you want to go back and listen to one of them. So always check out that description.
And with that, be sure to join us next week because, like I said, we're going to have something totally fun and off the wall for you before we dive into our next month's topic.
Yep, so hit that subscribe button and get notified when we post our next week's.